We are live.
We are live indeed. If you're watching on the recording, this is the ad-lib bit where we technically haven't started, but for the recording, just getting to listen to us waffle a little bit. So welcome. All right, so I'm going to dive in. So good evening, everybody. Those of you watching live and on the recording, welcome to, well, I guess it's an episode of Coaching for Coaches. That is the title of the show, the weekly vlog that I do on a weekly basis. Tonight's show is a little bit different. Tonight's show is really an interview with a good friend of mine called Andy Coley. I'll properly introduce in a second. And this is really exciting for me and really exciting for us because, as I mentioned in a video that I did in the Master Coach community, we have very, very excited to announce that we are going to be launching an NLP training very soon, and not just any old NLP training that you might see out there. We have literally, it's like Man United buying Ronaldo, but before he had the strop in his 30s. That is the best way of explaining
the good bit of Ronaldo.
Yeah, not that Ronaldo, the Ronaldo that joined Man United in his 20s, Mr. Andy Coley, who I welcome, and then I'll give a bio on. Andy Coley, welcome to the show, brother.
Hello, everybody. Good to see everyone, and great to be on here, and great to be joining you for this, Miles.
Great to have you, man. Great to have you here. And there's a few people that are here watching live, but for the benefit of the recording and those that are watching after, we'll treat it like it's a recording, and then there's going to be room for Q&A after. So really excited to announce that, as I mentioned in our Master Coach community, that we're going to be launching an NLP training to our community, which I'm really excited about as a person that's an NLP master practitioner myself. I see a lot of people that are joining in and joining us. So I guess what I'd like to do first, Andy, for the benefit of those that are watching on the recording and also watching live, is I'd love for you to kind of tell me a little bit about, who you are. I know who you are. Like, for those of you that don't know, Andy is, in my opinion, literally in the top 5% of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming facilitators in the world. He's a TEDx speaker, internationally renowned speaker. He's trained thousands of people in NLP and so much more than that. Literally, that is why we hunted Andy down and nobody else to come in and deliver NLP on our behalf. But yeah, Andy, tell us, other than the kind of scripted bio, tell us a little bit more about like who you are, so that people that are watching can get to know you, brother.
Yeah, great to be here. Yeah, so like I say, my name's Andy Coley. I am an NLP trainer. I'm also a dad with my 5-year-old coming in to say hello.
Hey.
Dad.
Hello.
Beatrice was running and then she tripped on over a step in the kitchen.
Okay, can you go and get Mummy and Daisy to sort that out? Yeah.
Mummy?
Yeah, I'll be down there in a minute.
Nice to see you.
Can you close the door as well? And I'm working from home, and I'm a parent.
Do you know what? What's really powerful about that? So, did you see, and those of you that are watching as well, did you see the British journalist at home during COVID trying to get kids out from the nanny?
Yes.
I thought, oh, if only you'd allowed them on the Zoom, you'd have won Dad of the Year. But because he was so like, get out of my Zoom, I was like, man, you would have got Dad of the Year on the BBC if only you'd have just embraced the kids. That's the world we're in now, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I studied NLP about 11, 12 years ago. And I got really interested about the way that the mind works, how we are able to shift our perspectives. And one of the reasons that why I studied NLP is in my mid-30s, I went through what I like to call my epic life fail moment, when kind of everything in my life was going wrong. I had a marriage I'd been in for 11 years. I was very depressed. I was massively overweight and unfit and unhappy and unhealthy. And I talk about this a lot in my TEDx talk, but it got to the point where I was having to make a decision. Do I still want to be here or not? I felt like I'd failed in my life. I'd failed my marriage vows. I'd failed my family because I was going to be the only person in my entire family that's going to get divorced. And I'm a failure, I'm a failure, I'm a failure. It was kind of like my mantra that I was living my life through. And I had a friend of mine who was an NLP master practitioner, an NLP coach. And he started doing some work with me and really starting to help me get refocused in my mindset so that I was able to start making changes. In fact, I remember he lent me his Unleash the Power CDs, and I just had them on every trip into work and every trip back. It's like I could recite that CD or those CDs word for word by the time. And I got really fascinated about not just people like Tony Robbins, but about the whole field of human development. You know, how do we develop as people with our potential? Yeah. And for me, NLP was kind of like a tool set, a methodology, some principles to live your life through. And I got really fascinated about NLP and about how to do NLP with myself and with everybody else. And suddenly discovered, well, I was already doing NLP, but I didn't know the structures and the kind of the frameworks around it. I guess we should probably cover a little bit about what NLP is, I guess. People
no, definitely, because I'm sure there's some people that will be watching and listening that know what it is already. And then there'll be some people, in fact, put a 1 in the chat if you're already familiar with NLP. I'd be interested to see, and put a 2 in the chat if you're not aware. It'd be interesting to see that. If you were to, before we get deep into NLP, Andy, if you were to describe NLP like in 3 words, what would you say would be like 3 words that spring to mind for you?
Probably at a personal level, it's how I tick. Like, how do I do me? How do I do my version of the world that I'm living through? What makes that up? What's created that? Why am I acting the way I act or reacting the way that I act? And so for me, I guess how I tick is probably a good summary at a personal level.
Yeah. What would you say are some like common misconceptions that people have around neurolinguistic programming? Because, you know, like I remember when I became a master practitioner of NLP, one of the things that I was really bad at when I first got into the personal development space was trying to change everybody when, like, in a really unsolicited way, right? So I was like, I've come across this thing that for me was like it was almost like the Neo in the Matrix to me. That's how I kind of felt when I first discovered it. But I remember kind of talking about it with certain people, and there was some real resistance to it. People saw it as like, oh, it's some trickery, and like, you know, some of the I remember people saying to me like, oh, people in a Tony Robbins event, you know, they must be planted there and all this kind of stuff. And remember there was a lot of negative pushback on NLP from people that weren't focused on it, weren't looking at it. And to be honest, most of my people that were being negative about it were probably because I was ramming it down their throats and in an unsolicited way. But what would you say is common misconceptions that people have around it?
I think people see it as very limited. Oh, it's just about communication, or it's about that body language stuff, isn't it? Or the way that the eyes go when you talk. Or so I think people take a small snippet of the whole of the principles of NLP and think that's it. And often that might be because something's been labeled as NLP in a particular context. Some people think that it's manipulative, you know, getting people to think a certain way. But language is manipulative. If I've got an idea and I want you to think about it, I'm manipulating you to think about it. So in and of itself, language is manipulative. And like any tool is, Adele's put it very perfectly, any tool is very powerful if used correctly. It's not the tool, it's the use of the tool. It's the ego going with the tool rather than the tool itself. You could say the same thing about coaching. Coaching can be used massively to do X or Y or Z to a person. If that's your intention, that's what you'll use the tool for. So for me, NLP has had a bit of a bad reputation. Yes, there isn't a massive research backing on it, but to be fair, the creators of NLP were very much making it open source, getting it out there, just use this stuff. And now actually in the field of NLP, there's an awful lot more research starting to back it up, awful lot more neuroscience, awful lot more brain scans, an awful lot more being done to cover the topics that we know work in NLP, in the way that they work. We just weren't able to prove why they worked. And to be fair, there was no massive organization or university or budget there to basically prove this stuff back in the 70s and the 80s. And also, you know, the two co-creators of NLP themselves weren't, you know, necessarily the best people making the news for the right reasons. It was all a little bit mad, all a little bit heady in the 70s and 80s when they were forming. And I guess that's another reason why NLP sometimes gets a bad rep. But there are many hundreds and thousands of practitioners out there doing amazing things with their NLP. And I'm always passionate about labeling everything I do as NLP, whether or not I'm going and working in a computer games company like Ubisoft. I've worked with hundreds of people in Ubisoft around setting better boundaries in the way they work and having resilience. That's all labeled as NLP. You know, whether or not I'm teaching as a practitioner course or a piece of content or doing a talk, I'm very passionate about the field of NLP. And that's why, for me, doing good NLP, ethical NLP in the right way is really important. And that's why the bodies and the associations and the people I've trained with is really important to me, that ethos and that credibility is there to make sure that NLP isn't filtered or diluted, you know, that people are doing good quality work with each other in a way that's empowering both sets of people.
Yeah, I kind of, one of the things I feel about NLP, or I have for a long time, is I kind of feel like it's like an instruction manual for the mind. Or let's say somebody joins a gym, there's an assumption that person, that maybe they join with a trainer, that person there'd be an expectation that they'd have a certain degree of understanding about the anatomy and the physiology to facilitate the change in them. And for me, NLP is just the mind equivalent of what a top level sports science, nutrition, physiology guru would do with a top athlete.
Yep.
For me, NLP is just the mind equivalent of what is mainstream accepted for the physical body. That's kind of my feeling about it.
And the higher up through the levels you go, the more you then find out about what's happening. If you're a top level professional, you know, trainer training with athletes at the very top level, you'll know everything's happening within that body, with the food that you put in, with the performance that you do. If maybe you're in a PT that's, you know, level 3, let's say in a gym, you know, in a public gym that's working with people, you might not know the nuances of exactly what's happening to the muscle fibers, you know, and the quality of food and how that's affecting the physicality of a person. But you know that it works in principle. Yeah. So therefore you can still do it. It still works, but you might not know that level. Down to somebody on the end, you know, down to the end who's just doing a yoga session or joining in something online, or, you know, hula hooping for fun. The bodies are still responding in the same way. Their minds are still responding in the same way, but they don't need to know how it works in order for it to work. Yeah. And I think the same thing's true about coaching. The more you get to know about coaching, sometimes you suddenly go, oh, this stuff really works. And then I got fascinated about well, how's it working? Why is it working in that way? And for me, NLP gave me another instruction set to do that with. And then psychology and neuroscience, they give you even more. And this is the thing with being a learner, isn't it? You end up becoming a lifelong learner of how do we tick, what the principles are. And at the end of the day, everything is just a model, an opinion. We don't actually know how the mind even works. What is the mind? If we start getting really deep in those questions, we just have some ideas or some models or some principles that allow us to go, okay, this makes sense at a level of understanding that allows us to then think about how the mind could be working. And again, for me, NLP gives you lots of that stuff that works.
Yeah. What would you say, you shared right at the beginning about where your life was before discovering NLP. What would you say has been a significant change that you've noticed in yourself as you've gone through your NLP journey? I'm sure there's been different ones, but what are some ones that stand out for you? Either some changes or some ways that you looked at the world that maybe have changed. What would you say has been some of your biggest changes in you since studying NLP and becoming a student of it?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is one physical change. This was me at that time back in my mid-30s, you know, when things were really bad for me. You know, this was me Christmas Day 2010, just moving back into my childhood bedroom. You know, Bon Jovi CDs and No Fear Peace posters on the wall, you know, basically going back to what I thought was, you know, giving everything up, going back to the beginning, go back to the start. And
we can't see it. Some people are saying they can't see it at the moment.
Oh, okay, sorry. I'm
Let's see if
there.
Why that's
Seem to have lost the Zoom. Hang on. Hopefully.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we're back. Just yeah, try and share that again. I do want to see
that.
I think I've seen it myself, obviously, because those of you who don't know, Andy and I have been friends for a long time. But yeah, see if you can share it again.
Let me just try it again. Do the joyous thing of Zoom. No matter how many times you practice. Right.
See.
There you go. There.
Yeah. Wow.
So
how long ago was that? When was that photo taken?
Well, 13 years now. Yeah, okay. 13 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah, this was me as I was at that time when I just starting to come out of my darkest times. Yeah, my wife and I at the time had made the decision to split up. We had decided that, you know what, enough was enough. We should stop trying to kind of, drag this relationship along, and we weren't the right people for each other. And so I moved back home with my parents. And at that time, when I moved back home, it was kind of like a life reset. I suddenly had more time to start to go, right, where's my life heading? What am I doing? What do I want from it? And when your life feels like it's got lots of stuff going, and happening at that moment in time, what can you start to control? And we talk about cause and effect in NLP, control what you can control and let go of what you can't at that moment. And so, you've probably come across the life wheel as a coaching tool. It's a great one to work on. And so because it felt like lots of my areas of my life, apart from my work and my family, were basically gone or ruined, what can I do next? So I started paying attention to things like my health. So I lost 6.5 stone in weight, 32 kilos over 9 months.
Wow.
When I started paying some attention to my eating and my exercise, and also recognizing what strategies work for me. I'm a group exerciser. I like everybody coming, come on, you're doing really well. I love that ethos of being part of a group, part of a tribe, part of a gang. That works really well for me when I'm going and doing classes. Yeah. For such a long time, I'd been trying to lose weight. We talk about these things called meta programs, kind of like motivational filters. But actually what I needed to do was start gaining health.
Of course.
Just simple switches in my head started to make a big difference. And so then started setting goals, 5K races, 10K races, and I even did a triathlon back in 2016.
This is really fascinating, and I knew that we'd end up branching off into things that weren't part of what I planned to talk about. But so what's really fascinating about what you just shared, Andy, is I always say, coming from a fitness background, mum ran a gym for 20 years, I always say that the vast majority of the planet know what to do to achieve their physical goals. But most of the planet don't achieve their physical goals. One, because common sense isn't always common practice. And two, and I think this does come down to an NLP thing, but I'd love you to speak on it more as more of an expert than me. One of the things that I learned in NLP that was fascinating for me was really around associations and around the kind of the beliefs that I had around certain things, like the beliefs I had around health.
Yeah,
this is maybe what beliefs I have now, and how, people maybe that consider themselves to have not had the right money mindset, how that's changed through NLP because they've been able to change their neuro associations to what money as a word and the beliefs underneath it means. Could you speak to that a little bit in terms of, because it's amazing the physical change, but like what, for those people that may be sitting here going, yeah, I would want to make a health change, or there's an area where I've got some limiting beliefs. What are some things in NLP that you could speak to that you go, well, it was learning that in NLP that helped you shift your conscious or subconscious to make the change that then made you change your physical body? Because I'm guessing you'd probably tried or at some point with your health before, but there's some new understanding at a deeper level than just the conceptual level that changed for you to make the change and never go back. I'd love you to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I tried before. I tried the cabbage soup diets, and I tried the Slimming Worlds and green weeks and red weeks and all that kind of stuff. I tried. There's the word, isn't it? Tried. I tried. Try's got so much effort about it, hasn't it? Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try, and he's right. Absolutely, do it or don't do it. Yeah. Make a decision. Do it or don't do it. Decide right now. Am I going to do this? Or am I not going to do it? Stop trying to do it. The key thing is recognizing, okay, what are the invisible things that we've attached in our life? What are the strings that are pulling us that maybe even being attached by other people? Those often are the beliefs. And if you look at the word belief, there's the word lie in the middle. Are we looking at the lie or are we looking at the belief? What's the piece that we're actually paying attention to? So we can be hit with so many beliefs that we create in ourselves because maybe we tried something once and therefore we create that as fact. Rather than I did it once and it didn't work, what can I learn from that? Because basically learning is knowledge plus experience. Learning is knowledge plus experience. So when you're learning something, you take knowledge that you have so far, you create and do something with that, experience something as a shift of that, and that equals learning. And feedback loops that back round. So start to recognize, okay, what are the beliefs that I believe are holding me back? Why am I stopping myself from losing weight, earning more money, whatever it happens to be, having a better relationship, letting go of this stuff, getting rid of all the family stuff that I wish I could let go of. So first of all, get really mindful of what are the beliefs that you have, okay? No matter what they are, write them down, get them out of here and put them on a piece of paper. And what are the things you are exhibiting or putting down as beliefs? Some of those will be beliefs, some of those will be values, some of those will be identity statements. I spoke about one earlier, I am a failure. We talk about when you're making changes in your life, the higher up through your neurology that you make that change, the more the impact is of that change. So for instance, if you change something at an environmental level, like who you're with and where you are, that will have a very tiny impact. And that's what people often do when they try and lose weight, gain health. They go to a gym or they hang out with fitter people. Now, maybe they change some behaviors. And by changing those behaviors, that has a little bit more impact. So they're doing something different. The act of going to the gym or the act of not eating quite so unhealthily. Maybe we gain some skills and some competencies. We go on a course, we learn about healthier cooking. Because we haven't changed who we are doing those things, that change doesn't stick. Once you start getting up into the higher levels, your values and your beliefs, things that are important to you or things that you believe about yourself, and those can be empowering beliefs or limiting. Then we start getting to the juicier stuff. And that's when you start to understand, what is it that's stopping me? What's stopping me from making this change? And what's stopping you is more often than not a physical thing, not a lack of resource. It's a mindset piece around either the resource or what you think about yourself. Above that, does your identity support who you'd like to be rather than who you feel you should be or are? And therefore, what's the purpose? For what purpose are you making this change? And we all know that we should be acting on purpose. As coaches, that's what we're doing, is basically helping people find their purpose again in their life, in their relationship, in their work, in their whatever it happens to be. And even higher than that, spirituality, legacy. What is what you're going to leave behind when you're not here? Some of the biggest things I remember you sharing is like thinking about when you're not here, what do you want your kids to remember of you? That question is like, whoa. Yeah. And then who are you? And for what's your purpose to support that? Then what your beliefs and values need to be to support that identity? What skills do you need? What behaviors are you doing? And therefore, who are you hanging out with? So there's a piece of work, there's a really amazing tool. Excuse me, Neurological Levels of Change by Robert Dilts. The Neurological Levels of Change by Robert Dilts. That is a fantastic tool that we cover on the practitioner course, actually. That's all around helping to map and set up those principles. It is one of the most amazing shifting tools when it comes to helping people set up and create that. But you can take the principles and the fundamentals of it. The things that hold you back are your beliefs. Where do your beliefs come from? Are they yours? Are they true? Did you try it once and then you created a generalization? I can never do that. This always happens. So just really start to allow yourself to question those beliefs. Are you using somebody else's voice? Is it something an ex-partner gave to you? A family member, your school teacher, somebody else who had power for you to model their approach? Because often that's where these beliefs come from. They're ones we create based on our experiences, and they're ones that we're given by the people around us. More often than not by any malice, just because, oh, well, you make your bed, you lie in it. You take your marriage vows seriously. All of this stuff, ends up as little phrases and words in our heads, then create a box. And so bursting that box open, de-identifying from the things that hold us back, from the I ams that are not serving you well, for me, that's some of the really powerful, juicy stuff you start to get to experience through NLP. And this stuff has impact and makes fundamental, massive changes. And of course, to do that as a facilitator, as a coach, you've got to understand the fundamentals of how are people working in the first place before you get to those big busting tools that enable your coaching clients to make those changes. So for me, NLP is about layering that knowledge and the experience and that learning, then the next layer, and then the next layer, and then the next layer. And for me, that's good practical NLP experience.
Yeah, love that, Andy. One of the things that we do in Master Coaches, we do a silly exercise that's really designed to take the negative energy out of limiting beliefs, and we get people to stand up and sit down when they hear a limiting belief that they think they've either had or have. And but that's only the first step, just making them aware that that they even have those beliefs. And I know that NLP is much deeper in terms of changing those limiting beliefs. What is some how does a person then go about, because I get conceptually, it's like first it's becoming aware of, but how does a person then eliminate or remove, insert whatever word that is right for them, a belief that they feel is no longer serving them? Like how do you go about doing that?
So there's a few ways that we talk about and deal with beliefs in NLP. So firstly, as a coach, you could linguistically question, as in basically ask questions of somebody and their beliefs. And so there are a few models, the meta model, which is about getting down into the specifics about what's going on for somebody in their head. There are questioning models around limiting beliefs. There's reframing. How can we look at something slightly differently and phrase it as a positive? So they see that experience is not actually as a limiting belief, but something that creates opportunity. So often, initially, what I'm doing is asking questions about what's that belief about, maybe where does it come from, how do they gain that, what do they think about that, how ingrained is that as part of who they are, first of all. Because sometimes by asking questions about that belief, you go, oh, okay, so how do you know that's true? And they go, oh, well, because so-and-so said it to me. Okay, cool.
Right.
What happened just before so-and-so said it to you? And by getting people to recall the moment in time in which they choose to take on the belief, often, if it's a limiting belief, something will shift in that belief. Now, here's the thing, right? With any change work, it's not necessarily about getting rid of. But what you're looking to do is just create shifts, if that's what the person wants to have happen. It's not for you to choose what happens next. Now, sometimes if it's powerful enough, it comes back. So there you go. That's a piece of feedback. Sometimes it suddenly goes, oh, you can like physically see the weight, dropping off them as they let this stuff go. There are other ways of looking at beliefs. You can look at them a lot more kind of metaphorically. What's the metaphor by which, or what's the story through which they're holding on to that belief that they believe to be true? What can you do to change that story, to change that internal representation so that it has a different impact? And again, there are lots and lots of different NLP tools that enable you to do that.
I think one of my favorite early NLP elements was framing, specifically reframing. And it goes back to, we had an Academy Day this week, and I shared a book review by Donald Miller called Hero on a Mission. And the whole premise of the book is that our life isn't a journey, as often the cliche says, but actually it's a story, it's a movie. And if we treated our life like a movie, that actually the people in our lives that we think are irritating, insert whatever word a person would consider that's maybe a bit more less PG than that, that actually if we were sat in a cinema and there weren't villain characters or adversaries, then actually it'd be a really boring movie and no one will go and watch it. And so for me, learning reframing and being able to look at my life through a different lens, for me was like really powerful. Because, if I think about, I remember being in day 3 or 4 of a practitioner and having a real breakthrough with my relationship with my mum, because I'd grown up with my mum. My dad wasn't around, And I hadn't realized that at an unconscious level, Andy, I'd put a lot of blame on my mum for my dad not being there. I wasn't even aware of it. And it wasn't until I was in that training that I was able to see that, and then also reframe and look at my mum through a healthier lens. And for me, that was really powerful. And I feel that it's really easy to intellectualize a lot of this stuff. But for me, it wasn't until I was actually in an NLP training and being trained through how to understand it at a much deeper level that there was real breakthroughs that were not just said with love and respect. Certain seminars that feel great in the moment and then they finish. It's kind of like having a workout in a gym, having an induction, and then it doesn't last. For me, NLP was more of a long-lasting thing. So powerful.
And this is the thing, is that when you had that realization, then other things will have shifted as a result. So therefore, the behaviors around your mother, because the thoughts about your mother are different, your behaviors will be different. However subtle those differences are, you could be more open in your communication. You could be feel more loving, because what we think we feel, and what we feel we do as a result of. So therefore, that think, feeling, do cycle shifts. If our thinking is shifted, something's changed, then it's amazing what happens as a result. And by the way, you already do this stuff. You don't need to come on an NLP course to change your thinking. Like, have you ever had a piece of music that you've absolutely loved, played it to death, and you hate it now, and go, oh God, not that piece of music again. Like, that's you changing your thinking. You once associated, I really love it. Now later you go, oh. Or maybe it's a piece of music you associate with an ex-partner, and because of that, you don't want to hear that song anymore. That's your brain's neuroplasticity at work. So what the tools of NLP allow you to do is do that with intent. And as a coach, it enables you to support your client to do that for themselves with intent. You're not doing the change for them, they're changing their thinking for themselves. Once they've done that with your support, they can keep doing that. That's why I love NLP. NLP is fantastic for self-coaching. And the stuff is really powerful. Be that working with somebody with a phobia or a fear or a limiting belief, or whatever it happens to be that's gotten stuck at a moment in time. We do a lot of work on inappropriate emotions. There's some fantastic time-based techniques that are really good for allowing yourself to go back into the past, look at a time when maybe you created an inappropriate response because it was needed at the time, bearing in mind that your unconscious mind wants the best for you, wants to support you, and will therefore create states that it thinks are there for your best interest. But sometimes those states don't help us. So I don't need to be reminded of what my 5-year-old or 8-year-old self went through when I was standing on stage at school and wet myself. That didn't happen to me, but it has happened to my clients. And that's coming out when they're 40 years old and need to present to the board. They don't need that stuff. They can let go of those things. The 40-year-old's got an awful lot more experience than the 8-year-old had. So let's give the 8-year-old some 40-year-old experience. And we're changing your mind around that. It helps to let go of a lot of this stuff that we've held on to. And so therefore the work that we do at a very metaphoric visualization, sort of modality type level in terms of, what are we picturing? What are we seeing? What are we feeling? What are we hearing? All of this work ends up changing your thinking, and the thinking therefore changes your results. And that for me is looking at what results do you want to get? What are you doing this for? What are you using this for with your clients? And absolutely, there are techniques and there are processes and there are steps. And I know that you guys teach a lot of fantastic models. And for me, NLP gives you the freestyle ability to be able to, once you know the models and you know the principles of the models, what can you then start to do to work with the person and the other stuff that comes up as a result of those coaching sessions? So if you've got people that you're like, oh, what do I do with this thing? That's where NLP can really step up and step in to help you deal with that stuff.
Love it. Amazing. Loving this conversation. I could go on forever. I've got so many other questions that I want to ask, but what I do want to do, respectful of time and also respectful of everybody else that's here, is I'd like to open up the floor. So if you've got a question that you'd like to ask Andy in this interview, then what I'd like for you to do is put a 7 in the comment box, and then what I'll do is I'll unmute you and I'll bring you on and you can ask Andy the question live. So if you've got a question that you'd like to ask Andy, put a 7 in the comment box and I'll unmute you and bring you on. If you're a little bit shy, and you'd rather not come on and ask the question live, you can type the question in the comment box. We're happy if you do that as well. What I do want to do now feels like a really good opportunity to share this with you, is some really exciting news. Andy and I, we've been obviously talking about doing some stuff together for a while. And what we've decided to do, or what Andy's going to do, is Andy's going to put on a workshop specifically for our Master Coach community on April the 15th, where he's going to go through a lot of this stuff in a lot greater depth. And that's going to be a free training for those of you that are here in our Master Coach community. So Andy, could you speak to that a little bit while we, I guess, delay for time if there's any questions coming in? What specifically are you going to cover on that one day? Why should the people that are here jump in? What are you going to be covering during the training, brother?
Yeah, so we're going to start the introduction really as an introduction. So you don't need to know, anything other than what you already know through your Master Coach training. But what we're going to be looking at is the principles and the core of NLP. What are some of the key models and key principles that really support good learning through NLP? So we're going to be looking at things like the NLP communication model. How do we take in and process information? Now, I teach this model so many times a week. I cannot tell you how many times a week on my one-to-one coaching clients. I was running a keynoting a conference for mentors in the NHS last week. I went through this exact same model. So we're going to be covering that model about communication, because it's really key for people to get to understand, why doesn't this person understand me? They don't understand you because they're not you. So what makes us? So the communication model is a really good breakdown of how do we see our world, and NLP would call it our map, rather than the reality that we think we're seeing, because we're not seeing reality, we're seeing our filtered version of reality.
Yes.
We're going to be going through some key principles like sensory acuity. What can you pick up? What clues can you pick up from the people you're working with? What are some of the things that they're saying, and how do they say them? That really will make a difference to the quality of questions that you ask. We're going to look at things like, how do people represent or represent what's going on inside their head? So we represent our word through the pictures that we create, through the words that we use. Why is it so important to make sure you use the words of the other person? So I'm going to be giving some NLP and clean language questions that you can immediately ask in your next coaching session. We're going to be looking at how do we store that information internally? What are some of the ways that we represent those pictures? Why are some of them in color? Why are some of them black and white? Why is there sound with some and not with others? We're also going to be looking at anchoring. Now, I know that you know anchoring, anchoring to things like music, anchoring to things like states, anchoring to touch. So immediately, if you need to find a good place to be or a good resource to have, you can anchor that. And then we're going to look at some of the linguistic things like reframing and strategies, and just kind of covering a little bit more and a little bit deeper on goals and outcomes as well. So there's tons that we're going to be looking at within that training day on the 15th of April, completely free for Miles's Master Coach community. Now, I'm going to say this is a whet your appetite thing, because we want you to get deeper with this NLP stuff.
Yeah, for me, for me, when I started the NLP journey, I realized it was like Pandora's box. It's kind of like, if you imagine a martial art, I think for me is a way of explaining it. When you start martial arts, obviously there's various belt grades to go through, and NLP is just the same. It's like if you want to master it, there are different levels to go through, and each level is designed to really give you an understanding of what you can then do to move on to the next level. And this is why Andy's here, because Andy is, in my opinion, is really a black belt in this stuff, and that's why we brought him in, and that's why we wanted only him to facilitate this stuff. Amazing.
Yeah, like you say, you've got to get the core principles right before you can move on to the next level.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm sure loads of you here could have gone straight into Master Coach, but if you hadn't done Coach first, in order to then Master Coach it, that's the whole point of mastery. Mastery comes through repetition, comes from doing, comes from working with clients and seeing clients, working with actual people. Yeah, not role playing or pretending or reading it in a book. You've got to do it. NLP is a doing thing. You have to do it in order to experience it. And so that's what we're going to start to do, is allow you to do some NLP. It's going to be interactive. It's going to be fun. Yeah, it's going to be friendly. So, it's absolutely not going to be death by PowerPoint, I promise.
Amazing. So we currently have, and for those of you that are watching, you might be watching this on the recording after the date, so don't be confused if you are. There are going to be other dates that we're going to be running, but we're running our first one Saturday, April 15th. And it will have a page up at some point. There isn't a registration page currently set up yet, but there will be a registration page being set up within the next few days, so that you can basically just get yourself booked on and get yourself registered for that. So really, really excited to have you there. Like I said, there's going to be a link shared sooner rather than later for you to register and make sure that you're booked on for that. Andy, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd love to share with everybody before we kind of close out?
I think just the key thing is, if you're curious about how you tick or how other people tick, and you want a little bit to go deeper into some of this, well, how, why, what, exploration, then you will not do any better than going and doing and finding out more about NLP. But whatever you do, go and do quality NLP. Yeah, you need to make sure that you're exploring this in a way that enables you to get to really understand, and not just a quick overview, really get to understand how you're ticking and how you're working. There was something that somebody mentioned earlier about, they finished their practitioner, they've got some work stuff coming up, they've semi-part to NLP, are they living at effect? I guess the answer to that question is, well, you tell me. The fact you've put that probably means yes. Although, is that where you need to be right now? Is that what you need in order to create space in order to finish your exams? In which case you've made a conscious decision, so therefore you're choosing that to happen and you're at cause. If you make a conscious decision and go, right, I learned this thing, or I'm busy on all these fronts, I've got to park this right now in order to focus my attention on this, you've made a decision. If you just feel out of control in all these areas, and I don't know what I'm doing next, you end up floating around between all of them, often that's you being very much at effect. So I would say, Adele, that you probably actually seem quite in control of that decision if it's a conscious decision that you've made. I did see there was a 7 that popped up into the chat.
Great awareness, Adele. Great awareness. So I think we do have Sarah's got a question, so I'm going to unmute her and bring her on. Anybody else that's here that has a question, if you want to ask Andy a question, you can either type it in the chat or put 7 in before we finish up. So don't leave here without your question answered. So Sarah, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi guys, how are you?
How you doing?
Yeah, really good. This sounds so interesting, absolutely amazing. Really appreciate you doing the day on the 15th. I will 100% be there. I've heard about this a lot lately, since I've heard about, the inner child work and people about limiting beliefs and stuff like that. Do you feel like knowing this, you could really, I have to say, a lot of the people that I'm talking to are people that are working on themselves. A lot of them are like, I have the limiting beliefs. It goes back to when I was a child or in school or things like that. Do you think that this would really be helpful, of course, doing these kind of workshops, to be able to get into that with people and to really understand more around where the limiting beliefs come from and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think all of this work will really fundamentally help you to work on where does this stuff come from. It's not specifically inner child work. That's a bit of a label created. It's a bit of a metaphor for the stuff that goes on. And often there's something called Gestalt theory. Often most of our emotions are created by Tom Ray, and we give them labels at that time. So at some point we experience something and somebody goes, stop being angry. And our mind, or our young mind goes, oh, that's anger. Or stop being guilty. Or why, you should be guilty about doing that. Stop being so embarrassed. And so often what we're doing when it comes to beliefs, and particularly around the emotions about beliefs, is we're going back to that moment in time when our unconscious mind created and then sort of got stuck in time, that belief and what that feels like. That's often the inappropriate element that comes up. But there are lots of things that get created when we're children, that we shift and that we change. And all of those things will enable you to work with your younger self. But the great thing is as well, Sarah, you can work with your older self. You can work on what you're going to be like in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. Imagine what your 80-year-old self might tell you right now.
Yeah.
In your mind, I bet you could imagine that. So therefore, to your unconscious mind, that's just as true as working with your 8-year-old self.
Yeah.
So that's the power of the tools, is that you're able to work at so many different levels. And because it's specific to you, and because you're giving yourself advice, that's the key thing that makes the difference.
No, brilliant. I remember you even said that about who are your future self and so on. And that's what they are like when they say you have a goal. It's like, this is your goal, but who are you, not the end goal or the start of the goal. It's like, who are you going to become? who are the person you're going to be, and even when you start to see that and unravel it, because of course you're like, oh, this is my goal, this is what I want to reach, but who are you going to become? And as you say, who do you see yourself in 5 years? What are the milestones you've put in? How did you create them? And then get excited about it, because people always look from A to C and not point B, and that's who are you becoming. So I love that part as well when you said that.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting, Andy. Thank you so much.
I've done some training in something called MBIT, which is around integrating in multiple brains.
Yeah.
And I love the expression that I learned from that is we are not human beings. We are not human doings. We are human becomings.
Oh, I loved. I've never heard that. I've heard of human doings and human beings, but human becomings. I love that. That's amazing. Yeah. Exactly. Who are you going to become? You're not. Yeah.
And
I love that.
and the ing is really important, because the ing shows it's still happening. This is what you can pick up in language. Yeah. If something's happening or I'm still doing, it's still active in my brain right now. So again, this is the sort of stuff that you learn from the linguistics. What are the words that people are using with me, and how does that make a difference to what they can change in their life right now? So we are absolutely all human becomings. We are not stuck in time.
Love that. That is so brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much.
Well done, Sarah. Great question. I love it. I knew you'd ask a great question. Amazing, amazing. Andy, been an absolute pleasure. Great having you here. And obviously this is just the beginning. I'm really excited to be there and to be there as a participant. As you know, I'm not just a teacher, I'm a student, and I'm really excited to be there and be on the other side and be taking it all in. So
exactly.
Really,
I'm just really passionate about helping people to learn about good NLP. And that's why, Miles, when we were chatting about, you were sort of saying, how can we introduce NLP to my group and give people this opportunity? I was like, yes, let's make this happen. Because I've run, dozens of practitioner courses, trained hundreds of people to become NLPers, and I just know that people who already have a good grounding, who already have a good mindset, who already have that want to change, can make a big difference.
Yes. Amazing. Andy, absolute pleasure. Well done, everybody, for being here. Make sure you've saved the date, Saturday, April the 15th.
Yep.
The link will be winging its way to you. Just make sure you've got it in your diary for now. Sooner rather than later, we'll have a registration page set up. But Andy, everybody give it up for Andy.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see
Andy,
you.
great to have you here, brother. And thank you for being here. And I'll see you and everybody April 15th.
Take care, everyone.
Amazing.